Hey, hi. Thank you for coming out. This is the Harvard Science Book Talk series. You know, I always write something and then I can't read it. It's weird. I'm sorry, but I'll try this time. But it seems so weird. Anyhow, thank you for coming out and thank you for coming to these talks. If there's somebody or some subject that we're not covering in these talks, please feel free to email me and say what you want, and then wait a year until someone writes a book. So this series is brought to you by a collaboration between the Harvard bookstore, the independent bookstore, and the Harvard Division of Science and the Harvard Libraries. So it's kind of a big deal. We have these talks not regularly, but often, and there's the next 3 talks I want to tell you about just because they're kind of interesting. There's a guy, Professor Robert Sapolsky from Stanford, will speak with Joshua Green from Harvard. Sounds like a hockey game. About his book, Determined, A Science of Life Without Free Will. That will be on May 2nd. On May 8th, we have Venki Ramakrishnan from Cambridge University, and he will speak with Antonio Regalado about his new book, Why We Die, The New Science of Aging and the Quest for Immortality. And finally, on May 13th, we have physicist Sean Carroll, and he will give a lecture on his new book, Quanta and Fields. Doesn't sound like a trade book, but I think it is. So I hope you'll come back for those, even if you're a computer scientist. Okay, so for tonight's lecture, I'm really pleased to introduce Leslie Valiant. He's the T. Jefferson Coolidge Professor of Computer Science and Applied Mathematics here at Harvard. And he's going to tell about his new book, The Importance of Being Educable. I hope I said that correctly. A new theory of human uniqueness. So Professor Valiant won the Turing Award in 2010 for transformative contributions to the theory of computation, including the theory of, this is my favorite part, of approximately correct learning, which seems like something I would be really good at. The complexity of enumeration and of algebraic computation and the theory of parallel and distributed computing. And when I read this, I just thought, wow. Sorry, are you feeling that same feeling? Yeah. I just wanted to say his most highly cited work with 8,000 citations is called A Theory of the Learnable. So you can see he knows something about this question of educability. Just as a comparison, just because you might not know what 8,000 means, the Higgs particle, when it was discovered, only had 22,000 citations. But most of those citations are from the collaborations that discovered the particle themselves. So it's about the same. So very big. So Professor Valiant teaches a graduate course on computational complexity, parallel computation, computational learning, and neural computation. It's not something I'm going to take, but I wouldn't mind taking his undergraduate class in graph theory and combinatorics. Okay, so now for the book, The Importance of Being Educable, I actually thought it should be, well, first of all, it was a little funny because I realized maybe it's a play on the importance of being earnest. I guess not from your face. But then I thought it really should be about the emergence of being educable. Because what this book is really about is how humans are different than animals and how humans are educable, and how that didn't seem to happen right away when Homo sapiens started 200,000 years ago, or I think that's about right. And that maybe there's something interesting in there. And this is part of what the book is about. And I find very exciting. And there's this sense in which if you have humans that are educable, you can make a civilization. Then I realized I don't really know what a civilization is either. But it's a really good book. It's about almost everything. It talks about education of people. It talks about the education of machines. It talks about many things that are kind of interesting, not just kind of, but it's the best part about it, it's like reading this book is like, you know when you're sitting on a bench with someone you like, and they're telling you about what they've been thinking about, and they're just incredibly clear and unbelievably smart? Do you know that feeling? It's like a soft wind is blowing as this person is talking, and it's like hours go by. It's like that. Reading the book is like that, and I rarely find books like that. There's not a hint of anything that I don't like. Just for people who know me, that's kind of amazing. So the good thing is that these are, I believe, Leslie Valiant's ideas, and they could be wrong, and they could be right. And that's kind of very exciting to read, rather than another book where it's not the person's ideas. So you're looking at me like I'm saying something wrong, and I should just stop looking at you. I know it's a long introduction, but I really, really like this book. But I gave myself a week to read the book, and I just barely made it, because you start reading the book, and after about 3 pages, you have to put it down and think, not, you know, this is like Derrida, and I can't understand it. Like, I can just sort of barely get it, but, like, oh, that makes me think. And then you have to think for like half an hour or 2 hours or something, and then come back to the book. Not think to understand it, think because it's really engaging and exciting and makes you think. So, that's what it feels like. And I just want to say one last thing, is that, you know, Leslie Valiant he sat in an office for 35 years, 3 minutes walk from my office, and I've never been in his office. And it's really sad about Harvard, and students know this, I'm sure, that we're so interested in our own thing we're doing that we don't realize that there's some brilliant guy down the hall, and we don't take advantage, even if we know they're brilliant, which I did, we don't take advantage of that by just hanging out in their office. And then about 35 years later, you just think, like, I'm a total goofball. How did I miss that? But in another way, I'm thinking, if I had gone to Leslie Valiant's office and hung around, he probably wouldn't have written this book. And so now, finally, we're going to hear from this brilliant guy down the hall who wrote, I think, his best book so far, a truly marvelous and engaging book, Leslie Valiant.
Well, thank you all for coming, and thank you for the introduction. With such an introduction, I'm sure it would be best for me just to stop now, but I think I'm obliged to talk for a little while. But thanks for the introduction. So actually, I think you covered the content of the book, very well. So it's very hard for me to improve on it. But I'm obliged to say something. Okay, I've even got a clock there. So the book is really about people, but I talk about people and machines in the same breath. And maybe the basic question is, what's the central characteristic which people have in a certain sense, which I'll try to define. And this is what I call educability. So this idea of talking about people and machines in the same breath, we were given a license to do that by Alan Turing. And so I'll just start by quoting him on just to set the scene, to make sure we're all on the same place. As far as the question of which everyone asks then and now is, can every task done by humans be done by a machine? So in a radio broadcast in 1951, so I'll just quote 3 sentences, he said, it is customary in a talk or article on this subject to offer a grain of comfort in the form of a statement that some particularly human characteristic could never be imitated by a machine. It might, for instance, be said that no machine could write good English, or that it could not be influenced by sex appeal or smoke a pipe. I cannot offer any such comfort, for I believe that no such bounds can be set. So he told us then that basically everything which humans can do, in principle, you can simulate by machines. And this wasn't just an opinion, this was based on science and his science. So it follows from what's called the Church-Turing thesis, which basically says that a formulation of computation due to him captures everything possible in the universe, which amounts to some mechanical processing, mechanical information processing. So however our brain works, we can simulate it in a standard computer. So this, I think, is kind of science, although this is re-litigated all the time, of course. But what's left unresolved? So this says that whatever we can do, machines can do. But what's left unresolved is, well, what is it that we can do? Okay, so characterizing what we can do is what's not very well understood. And so, for example, simulating us by machine is hopeless if we don't know what we're doing. Okay, but understanding ourselves may have other benefits too. Okay. So just to make this point more that we don't understand ourselves too much, let's just take this notion of intelligence. So we seem to think that intelligence is what characterizes our species. So we're almost obsessed with this. So when we measure our mental abilities, we call the result an intelligence quotient. When we attempt to emulate our mental faculties, we call it artificial intelligence. Some people fear, some very prominent people currently, that machines more intelligent than us would be an existential threat to us. They take over. And when searching the cosmos, we're seeking intelligent life. So anyone would think that we'd know what intelligent life is. So this has been experts on intelligence, and the American Psychological Association did have reason to investigate what intelligence meant. And in a famous report, they reported that, this is a quote from a quote, that when 24 prominent theorists were recently asked to define intelligence, they gave 24 somewhat different definitions. So it seems that we have no idea what intelligence is. We don't have a definition. I mean, no one tells us, how do you recognize an intelligent person? We think we can do it, but what is it? So basically, in some sense, my notion of educability is aimed at a rough level to offer something which we can define, and maybe characteristics of humans. And just something in the news recently which is relevant. So Harvard, I think this week, reinstituted the SAT as obligatory for applicants. But have you ever wondered what the SAT stands for standard something test, but what does the A stand for? So apparently at one time it used to stand for aptitude, but then they decided it's not really aptitude. Then they decided it stood for assessment. Then they decided it's not an assessment. Then they said SAT : reasoning. Then they stopped doing that. So now officially it's SAT, where the A means nothing. Okay, so it's just a brand name. So we are exposing young people to take a test where the providers of the test don't tell us what it's for. It's like like going to a supermarket and seeing lots of boxes which all say that eating this is correlated with being less hungry at the end. So certainly the reason why SATs exist is because there's some correlation between your performance in SATs and other things, but of course, lots of things are correlated, and maybe there's something better you could do. But anyway, so I'm just quoting this to say that, to make the point that we don't understand certain things at all, rather than to criticize the decision to reinstate the SATs. Okay, so in trying to pursue this question of finding some human characteristic which we can define better than intelligence, so how did I ask the question? Well, for people who have the book already, the designer of the book cover got this interpretation. So basically, the arrow at the cursor at the bottom is a picture of a cursor. It's not a cursor on my screen. And this is some prehistoric axe head. So the question which the book asks is, what was the cognitive capability humans had which enabled us to go from the former to from the top to the bottom in not very many thousand years. And certainly it's widely believed that it wasn't any biological change. There's no known biological changes which have swept through the whole human population in this period. The change must have been caused by some cognitive capability which we had from the beginning, which just took a long time to develop. Okay, and so this cognitive capability I call the civilization enabler. So it's this one characteristic we had, which it's a capability, it's cognitive, which enabled us to develop the civilization we have. So the kind of what I have to offer is my background in computer science, and so why this effort to define this capability is possible, I think, from a computer science viewpoint, I'll try to explain. But the computer science insistence, which I use, is that the task which you assume you're defining has to be well defined. So before and after, you have to know the difference between before and after. And also, in principle, it should be computationally feasible. So you shouldn't write down something in the dream world which there's no way in which you can actually realize it. So this computer science angle is quite subtle, and there's lots one can say about it. So it's been discussed for a long time. So for example, Herbert Simon, among many things, was also a psychologist. So he predicted in 1958 that within 10 years, all psychology papers will be written in terms of computer programs. That psychological theories will be in terms of computational theories. And I suppose that this should happen eventually became pretty obvious after Turing, I think. And it's been a program, obviously, among psychologists for a long time, but just exactly how to do it isn't so clear. And I've made some choices here. So, but the choices I've made are explained in the book, and I'll try to hint at them here. Okay, so what is this civilization enabler? What's unique to humans as compared to other animals? Well, any number of people have made their comments on this. There's a website which looks at 617 different topics, which academics have investigated as the difference between humans and our living relatives. But I'm looking at not just any difference of humans and other species, but the one which is responsible for, one which is a cognitive capability, which plausibly explains why we could develop our civilization. So for example, there are lots of different, like eyebrows. Apparently only humans have eyebrows. In the animal kingdom, maybe. But in any case, there's no theory which explains that if you have eyebrows, you can do clever things. Any number of things have been emphasized by people who look at human history. So animal domestication, clearly probably very important in our history, but again, just because you can domesticate animals, it's not clear why you can do everything else. Brain lateralization, our brains can do more specialized things. So we're collaborative, so are many other species. Social learning, some people emphasize that. This is learning from other individuals. Intelligence, well, I've mentioned that. And then we go to things like symbols and language. So this clearly gets closer to what we're trying to talk about. But again, I'm trying to discuss a capability. Okay, so language by itself isn't enough. You can teach some apes language, and just because they've learned some language, it doesn't mean they can do any more. Okay, so briefly, so among the many people who've commented on this, so Darwin, for example, at one point makes the judgment that among these obvious kinds of distinguishers, humans are different only to degree and not in kind. That all these usual things animals can do to a lesser extent, and we're just better at it, at the many things. So this special human characteristic, if I mention Darwin, one should imagine something which isn't that complicated, because evolutionary, it probably happened in a rather short period, a million or 2 years maybe. And then just the further point I want to make to distinguish what I'm doing from what other people are saying when they discuss distinguishes of humans, is that so one advantage of doing this computer science approach is that it's a bit more precise than the other approaches. The other approaches are rather vaguer words. So if you're more precise, of course, you commit yourself. You can't be vague. But you can express things which are slightly more complicated than you can just with informal words. Okay, so by being a bit more technical, you can say slightly more complicated things, and maybe we need to say slightly more complicated things than these simple single words. Okay, so so briefly, I'll say what my simple thing is, and then I'll say what some consequences are. Okay, so I call this distinguisher educability. So it'll be a composite of 3 different things, and it's like a technical definition, but clearly I'm calling it educability because it should remind one of generally of getting educated, of learning in a variety of different modes. So the summary of this definition is that it consists of 3 capabilities, each of which I can say more in a while. So the first capability is learning from experience, which, say, acquiring beliefs by generalizing from experience. So this is, philosophers call this induction, computer scientists call this machine learning now. So this I'll formulate exactly as machine learning is formulated now in computer science, which as a technology is clearly successful. But this is just one part. So the second part is that once you've learned these things from experience, you've learned to recognize elephants, you've learned to recognize food, you should also be able to chain together what you've learned. So if you look at a scene, you can recognize something, you can recognize elephant, and then you know elephants are big, you can chain together what you've learned in combination. And this is some kind of reasoning. This will amount to a very basic form of reasoning. And this is reasoning applied to particular situations. And the third aspect is that besides learning from experience, we can also learn by having someone explicitly describe their theory. Okay, so certainly when you sit in a lecture room, you hear someone else's theory. But here, clearly, what you can do is that you can learn the conclusions of someone who may have learned from experience themselves, and you just have to listen once. You don't have to have all the experiences. Okay, so roughly it's this. And you have to do all this in a rich enough world, which I'll say more about. So we're able to, when we look out, we can see a multi-object world. I can see several people here, tell relationships and things like that. Okay. Okay. So I won't say too much about educational philosophy, but just to mention here that, so number 3 is the caricature of what old-style education is. People sit in a lecture room. 1 is more hands-on. You learn from your personal experience. And 2 is being able to apply what you've learned to instances. So this covers some very basic points which educational philosophers make that are parts of education. Okay, so as far as evolution, so I don't really have to make any particular assumption. I don't depend on any particular assumptions, but I can speculate just for fun. And so if I want to speculate, then what I would say is that these 3 things evolved on Earth at different times. So being able to generalize from experience, that's very ancient. Almost every animal has to have some ability to adapt to what it sees, recognize where the good food is. So that may go back 1 billion years. Once you can learn from experience, it's kind of chaining together what you've learned is a very natural thing to do. Certainly if you fail to do that, you're missing out. That's probably ancient as well. But the third part that, that someone else's, what someone else has learned can be explicitly transferred to you as if you had learned it yourself, that seems to me very, very close to, humans certainly do it well. They do it well in lecture rooms. And certainly language is the usual means by which we can transfer someone's theory. But in principle, you can also do it by some sort of physical demonstration. And so our species is usually dated to about 300,000 years ago. And if I had to guess, I'd guess that this ability we have of educability may have been there right from the beginning, and somehow evolved in our ancestors before that. It's just there's not much evidence of any biological changes sweeping through the whole human population in the last 300,000 years. People have looked for it. So it may be that this ability is something which evolved very early, but just took a very long time to kind of show its face. And so this is just a speculation. It's not essential to the argument. Okay, so just to emphasize that, so in the book hints at some technical things that one can try to define these three tasks fairly precisely as computational tasks. And that's the strength of this approach, that you can be fairly specific. And as I said, this learning from experience is the way I formulate it is the way it's been formulated in computer science for, say, 40 years. And it's the one which is very successful, as we see from large language models. So it's convenient that now everyone's seen what large language models can do and may be impressed. So this basic notion of learning from experience is something whose formalization is, has some basis. And so the two-minute specification here is that I talk in terms of computers here maybe, that you've got a learning algorithm such as deep learning. You train it by giving it examples, and after you do this, you get a classifier, which is a program which can classify new examples for you. Okay, so the learning algorithm produces a program, and then this program will classify new examples according to the label. So maybe you're training it to recognize whether a picture is an elephant or not, and the label is whether it's an elephant or not. So so this is what you do, but you do want to okay, so D. Okay, so both in theory and practice, you have to say where your examples come from. If you train something in one world, or if you learn something in one world, it may not work in a different world. Okay, so this is the only one thing with symbols on. So this is the probably approximately correct model of learning, which Melissa mentioned. So one needs to define, give some definition of when you can declare a person or a machine to have learned. And this is the definition. Oops. Okay, so the blue circle is the circle of all possible things in the world, maybe, or all possible pictures, maybe an infinite number. And this line divides the ones which are true positive examples. So these may be pictures of elephants. These are not of elephants. You're trying to learn a predictor of elephants. Inevitably, it's going to be wrong on some rare examples. It's going to make an error. And so you want a definition which gives a requirement on the error, which is kind of doable, but not, if you can do it, then surely you have learned, but it's not so severe that no one can do it. Okay, so the restriction is that the error will decrease as a constant power of the effort you put in. So the N is typically the number of computational steps you do, maybe related to the number of examples. But you want the errors to go down the more effort you make, but you want it to be to be reasonably rewarded. So saying the same thing, you want a better prediction with more effort, but you want to be affordably so. So if the things go down algebraically, then by making more effort, you'll be better rewarded. And so spelling it out, it, for example, means that so you've trained made some effort, and supposing you train 10 times more, maybe you halve the error. So then you want that if you train 10 times more still, then you'll halve the error again. So this way, you're always tempted to put more and more effort into learning because you get some reward. And of course, this is some explanation of why people are putting tens of millions of dollars now into training these large language models and don't quite know when to stop. They'll make it bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, so this is a definition of learning, and just one more comment, since there maybe a few people who know about machine learning here. So this model just formalizes generalization. So generalization here means that you see some examples, some are labeled elephants or not, and given a new picture, you can generalize to say which are elephants. So that's what the model is about, nothing else. Now, if I talked informally, so supervised learning is the informal way of saying the same thing, then when you talk about supervised learning, then there are many things which humans do you may expect a machine to do, besides generalization. So people complain about explainability, and the machine should explain why it believes this thing is an elephant. It should do a litany of other things too. But it's found that machines, unless you do something special, the machines don't automatically do these other things. So the algorithms used, like deep learning, have been discovered to be good, just a generalization. The other things you don't get for free. So, okay, so one advantage of being precise is that you don't expect too much. Okay, so by being precise, you know what you get, and you realize that to get more, you have to do something else. Okay, so so large language models are basically trained on enormous amount of text, and what they are trained to predict, to generalize well for, is the next syllable, the next token. Okay, that's what they're great at. Of course, there's a large investment in these, and there's a big question of what else can they do. So this is what half the world is occupied with now. You can experiment with large language models and wonder, what on earth is it doing? Can I trust what it's saying? Well, basically nothing is promised. They're trained to predict the next token. Okay, so this is part one. So part two is chaining. So once you've done this, the second part of educability is that you can string together things you believe in. So Aristotle said that all belief comes from syllogism or induction. So induction means what I just talked about. Syllogism means stringing together, chaining together. So far we're consistent with what he's saying. And the problem here is that what we're chaining together now are rather uncertain beliefs. So you're only so sure that this picture is an elephant, and you're only so sure of something else. When you do reasoning on things you're only so sure of, what are you doing? So again, you need some answer to this, and in educability, there's some answer, which I call robust logic. And okay, so very, very, very briefly, the issue here is that, I've drawn a brain around this now. So the issue here is that if you only have this standard learning on the left, which I call a single learning box, so that can do a lot, but maybe not as much as you'd like. And so what robust logic amounts to is that you're going to learn with many boxes, but have some principled way in which to string together their various conclusions. So you can do some sort of reasoning on the conclusions of the various boxes. And what you expect is the same as you expect of logic. So in logic, what you expect is that if you chain together some facts you believe in, you want to be able to believe in the conclusion. So that's called soundness in logic. Okay, so here it amounts to saying that if you chain together two rules, you believe to 99%, you believe in the conclusion 98%. Okay, so anyway, so this is basically what robust logic does. And just to give just one brief view of what it's about. So the idea is that you have your mind's eye, which is just like a human mind's eye. You're thinking of something, and you're thinking of your dog, and you're thinking that your dog likes something, or that your dog like. But then you have some rules you've learned, and your rules may tell you your dog likes a bone. So how this operates is that you're thinking of some things, there's some millions of rules in your head which you've learned somehow. You'll apply the rules and you'll complete the picture, you make predictions, and you'll see whether you like the outcome. This is the training or the reasoning. So standard logic has a way of putting this together, but in robust logic, we adopt machine learning. So basically, in this robust logic, we will have learned a rule for predicting whether some object is a bone or not. And when we see a scene, we see a dog and dog likes something, then we'll invoke this rule to predict that this thing is a bone. Okay? So it's a bit like maybe for every word in the English language, having learned a predictor for it. Okay, so this is what this robust logic is about, and it's got some properties which make it sufficient. Okay, so as I mentioned, I think these two basic capabilities are probably many mammals generally have. But so when we discuss this human civilization enabler, the hypothesis here is that in fairly recent evolution, we evolved a third aspect on top of this, which makes the whole thing much more powerful. And so this is being able to take instructions from others. So we have this architecture, which I've hinted at, but now we can also receive some explicit program to predict the next picture. So someone can tell us that dogs like bones. It doesn't have to be your experience. Someone can teach you the laws of quantum mechanics. You don't have to do the experiments to verify them. You just sit in the classroom for a semester and you learn a lot. You haven't verified anything for yourself. So the hypothesis here is that I'm defining educability as the integration of these three capabilities. Okay. So the upside, especially of the third part, is clear. So many people have discussed very similar things. So clearly being able to learn your theory is very powerful for me, because I don't have to do all the experiences you may have had to gain your theories. And also these discoveries which we share can be very, very general. So I think, so methods of reasoning, for example, doing basic arithmetic is a method of reasoning, which at some point was discovered in our civilization and is spread by this process, and obviously it totally changes our civilization. Similarly, doing probabilistic reasoning, estimating probabilities in a rational way. Again, that's a fairly recent discovery. Now it's taught, so many people can do it. So I think it's important to realize that many of the things, discoveries aren't kind of tangible, aren't theories about the world. They may be just methods of reasoning. So with all this, so clearly the accumulation of science, which is with contributions from thousands of individuals, that's clearly a result of our ability to take instruction from others. But instruction from others by itself wouldn't be any use, because someone has to discover stuff in the first place. So someone needs to have experiences and generalize from experience, and also we need to apply these things to cases. So we need all three parts of the definition, so if we have this, then this is a possible way of explaining how we've managed to discover the many different things, share the knowledge, and pass it on. Okay, complex cultures. Now, so this is basically the model. So if you wanted an artist's impression, the one thing I want to point out is that this is the actual environment is this very complex world we live in. We live in a very complex world. It keeps changing. So when we learn from experience, we're fitting our knowledge to the complexity of the world. We're adapting to the world. If an animal learns where to find good food, it's going to be true. It's really going to find the same good food there the next day. The robust logic basically builds on this, so it takes things we've learned from experience and can combine it, and it's still grounded in experience. Okay, so the strength of the first two, which I think probably all mammals have, is that it's really grounded in real experience, that it's tied to the world. Okay. Now, what's especially good as far as humans is that we can also acquire some program like this from someone else. You tell me something. Of course, I've got the problem of whether to believe you or not. And the problem is that, your theory, which I'm acquiring from you, may just not be true, okay? So I think, this is the situation. And in the case when we can trust the teacher, so like in the normal educational setting, what we learn we can trust, presumably. It's been in a science course, you learn about stuff which is well established, well supported by experiments. You learn an awful lot which you couldn't have verified for yourself. You don't even have time to do the experiments to verify it for yourself, of course. So you can build up this enormous knowledge which is entirely based on taking knowledge from others. But you do have to trust them. So that's the model. So now quickly I can just point to three issues. There are many issues which, having developed this model, made me think in different directions, which I hadn't had this similar thoughts before, so I'll quickly just hint at those. And the book does some more. So what about the downside of being educable? So the fact that we've got this extra ability to take knowledge from others is very powerful if you do science, for example, but does it have a downside? And, come to think of it, I decided that I got frightened. It does have a downside. Because, as I said, without it, everything we learn is grounded in experience. But once we absorb knowledge by instruction from someone else, then who knows? So basically, what I realized is that what I wrote down is a powerful way in which we can acquire knowledge, but nowhere is there any ability to verify knowledge. Okay, and in fact, it may be impossible to verify knowledge. If someone tells you something happened on the other side of the world, you're not going to go there to check it out. Okay, so we've got this great capability to process knowledge, to acquire knowledge, but evolution didn't give us a comparable ability to verify knowledge, and that may be just because it's impossible. It's not that it failed to do it, but it may be that we're not suspicious enough, but we're not very good at evaluating knowledge. So then we're easy victims to arbitrary belief systems which we're exposed to. Certainly in past history, there have been very weird belief systems which now are discredited, people believed in. And to this day, of course, there are weird belief systems going around, conspiracy theories, etc. So the question arises, what can we do about this? So the only thought here is that so many people speak about the problems of deep fakes produced by computers and other ways which we can be tricked. But here, what I'm emphasizing is that there's a basic weakness in us humans. We're just not equipped to evaluate the truth of the knowledge we're exposed to. We're used to trusting. We basically we work well when we can trust the information we're given. So the fault is really in ourselves. There's some fault in ourselves, and the question of what we can do by education or other means, I think, is important, and this gives you a slightly different angle on it. Okay, so that's one thought. Thought two. Okay, so I'm jumping around here. So thought two is people are worried now about computers becoming so intelligent that they'll take over. Okay, and that's the notion of singularity. And the history of this notion is usually credited to the origins to I.J. Good, and he had an argument which sounds like saying that there's an ultra-intelligent machine. An ultra-intelligent machine is one which far surpasses all the intellectual capabilities of any man, however clever, etc., etc. So here's an argument which says that if you, maybe you've seen these arguments. So these arguments are usually based on the idea that intelligence is some sort of linear measure. We're up here. Once machines get smarter than us, then somehow they'll take over, and we'll be to them just like low animals are to us. Okay. So I don't quite believe in this argument, and I think the light which kind of the educability approach gives is that if we get to understand our capabilities in terms of components which are understandable, tangible, like learning from experience, training things together, etc., etc. So if intelligence is something which is understandable, then having a lot of it isn't so frightening anymore. It's like having a chess program which is smarter, better than us, isn't so bad. Maybe you play chess with it, you're going to lose. You just make sure nothing much rides on you losing. So these stories of fearing the singularity are usually based on some sort of mysticism, that intelligence is something we don't understand. These mysterious machines will be smart. We don't know what that is. They'll take over. We don't understand it, and things are going to be bad. But if one can understand these cognitive capabilities in terms of tangible components, then it's like any other technology, chemistry, nuclear physics. It's dangerous, but if we understand it, there are things we can do to cope. Okay. And so lastly, let's get back to education. So basically, I'm claiming that central characteristic is really a readiness to be educated. That our special thing is that we're just waiting around to be educated throughout our lives. We can take in information in all these different senses. There's a big capacity to understand the world, string things together, builds up. Okay, so this is our basic capability. So if we believe this, then what are the consequences? Well, certainly we should put education at the center of our of whatever we do. Well, you may think that everyone in this room already believes in this, but so maybe we do. But just to finish off, I'll just put up this thought that, in fact, if you think that education is so central, you'd imagine that it's a subject which is really taught at major universities, okay? And for example, it so happens that at Harvard, there's no undergraduate concentration in education. And so the question is, well, why is that? Is it that our society does not regard education as so important? It doesn't regard education as being so understood, what does it mean? Okay, I'll stop there.
Great, thank you. You know what I think we'll do? Because my questions, I already talked a lot. So
Okay.
I was wondering whether maybe the audience had questions. And someone will come with a microphone. Elliot will come here. So there's one over here and another here. Okay. Great.
That was, so this works? Yeah. I'm Nick Trefethen and Seas. That was wonderful, thank you. You talked a lot about the importance of acquiring beliefs from others, and yet you almost completely avoided the word language. What's going on there?
Well, yes, language is a convenient medium to do that, and it's almost universally the one we use. Probably without language, we probably couldn't exercise this ability. But it's not the capability itself. Okay.
Could you tell us a little bit about how emotion and imagination enter into this?
So one out I have is that what I'm claiming is that I'm trying to define a capability which is special to humans and animals don't have. So I suspect that emotions are well developed in other species, because there are many aspects of us humans which the rest of the animal kingdom share, and I don't have to describe those. Okay, so I don't have anything special to say about that. So we do have emotions, but what I'm describing is this cognitive capability of being able to acquire knowledge. So I'm not trying to describe the human condition here. Okay, I'm fairly narrow in trying to describe this cognitive capability, which you can give machines and humans, where we can learn information and run with it. Okay, so we have all kinds of internal percepts like emotions. Yeah, I don't discuss those, no. So the other question was imagination. So there's a bit of room for imagination here. So this mind's eye, which I didn't say much about, is kind of where it corresponds to, psychologists will talk about short-term memory. It's where you imagine, it's what you're conscious of at the time. So that's where you'd put what you're currently planning, or what you're thinking about. So there's a place for imagination. There's a technical sense of imagination here, yes.
Hi, Les. What does your theory say, if anything, about the disruption of education generally? Generative AI, for example, would seem to offer lots of opportunities for altering, to your last question here, not only undergraduate education, but all education.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't have a good answer to that. What I'd wish for is that the process of education would be understood better, in that our internal process of being educated would be understood better, so that we can be better educated. Okay, so certainly having worked in education for a long time, there are lots of theories of what you should be doing to educate your class better. But I know what's missing is some deep understanding of what thing really works and why. Okay, so I think how you can use technology is certainly very interesting, but somehow I think we have to understand ourselves first before we can decide how best to use technology. Okay.
Hi. So how does educability relate to intelligence? I guess you said we don't know what intelligence is. Are you suggesting this as a definition of intelligence, or are they equivalent things or different things?
No, I really don't know what intelligence means. No, I just meant that if you want to, for your self-respect, to say what way you're different from your dog, then instead of saying you're intelligent, you should say you're educable. Okay, so that's okay. All right, is that an okay answer?
Can you think of any limits to learning through instruction, or like in theory, could it replace the first learning through experience?
Is the microphone on?
Is this on? Okay. Can you think of any limits to learning through instruction? Like in theory, could it replace the first bullet point?
So any limits to learning from instruction?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Probably there are natural limits in terms of computation that you can learn arbitrary programs, arbitrary sequences of actions. So it's kind of a Turing complete in the conventional sense. So there's no limits to, it's clear what the limits are, computation limits, it's clear what the limits are. But the basic question is, whom should you trust, which programs to acquire? Okay.
Hi. Thanks for the talk. I guess I have a sort of similar question about the computational aspects of learning from instruction, and that it seems like it would be very useful for perhaps for machines and computers to be able to teach each other different things. And like computationally, if I have some succinct description of my hypothesis, I guess I can just like send it over, but it's sort of useless to a human to look at it, or for a computer to be told, a human hypothesis. So I was wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, no, but as you say, if you can express your hypothesis in terms of any explicit language, like a computer language, then you can just do it, right?
Sure, but I guess it's not actually useful to me to look at like a computer, like necessary to look at like the code of a neural network or the weights of a neural network and be able to understand there.
So you're saying that the computer may not be able to explain to you what it's doing?
Sure, or the other way around, in that I can certainly communicate it, but that doesn't mean that, I guess like there's some aspect of me like understanding what this other person has said, or what this other machine has said.
Yeah. Well, certainly any machine or any human would only be able to take in these instructions in some language or for formalism. So each entity needs some language for its information to be supplied. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Thank you for the talk. I wanted to ask a little bit more about your point about the singularity and how you reconcile your optimism on that point with like Kurzweil's law of accelerating returns, or Moore's law, this idea that technological change is exponential, and how you can sort of project what we know about current models on a linear path without sort of that exponential growth that a lot of other scholars are predicting will sort of explode at this singularity.
Right. I mean, I think the issue is what's growing exponentially. So what I'm saying that if you specify what's growing exponentially, then you shouldn't be necessarily so frightened. I mean, certainly. So one confusion I think is that certainly one shouldn't. Control is different from intelligence or educability. Okay. So certainly one shouldn't give control to a machine if you don't have faith in the machine working in your interests. So certainly humans will want to keep control. That's for certain. So part of the argument for people who fear the singularity is that somehow machines will seize control from us. Well, clearly, I don't see why that has to be, because if you understand what the machines are doing, you can make sure that you keep control. So I think the onus is on people who worry about singularity to specify in what sense, what grows exponentially, what you worry about, and how is this thing going to seize control from you. But I want the discussion in terms of tangible, understandable notions, as I've described. And if you do that, then I think it's like any other technology. Chemistry is dangerous, but we can control it and as long as there are no accidents or bad people, then we should be okay.
So one more question, and then we'll.
I think I'll pass in that case. I have more of an observation than a question.
That's okay.
I think.
Oh. Okay. Well, listen. Oh, there's another one. He didn't have he didn't want to say his observation.
No. I think.
Oh.
Yes, thank you. So something I guess I was, perhaps a bit confused about is really, how do we really define the difference between education and kind of a trained or learned behavior, right? Insofar as I can teach my dog to, jump through a hoop, or I can teach a person to integrate a function, and those seem like they're, different. But from a computer science perspective, where do you really, distinguish those two from each other?
So the book does discuss this. So in informal terms, what I say is that training is when the teacher knows exactly in what circumstance you want this ability to be exercised. Because training is when you're training someone to do a very particular task which you can foresee. Whereas in education, like in a classroom, you teach stuff and you hope it's going to be used by students for things you can't even imagine. Okay. So certainly when you, so certainly this training by example, the usual machine learning thing, is really training, because you know exactly you want performance for a very well-defined task. But once you certainly you transfer knowledge by instruction, then you're not quite sure how it's going to be used. Okay, so is that an answer?
So really, like focusing on the generalizability of, the training.
Yeah. So certainly, I think it makes sense that point of education is that you want to learn things where neither you nor the teacher can anticipate how the knowledge is going to be used later.
Thank you.
So let's, in a minute, thank Leslie again, but just across the hall is the library where Professor Valiant will be signing books, and you might be buying them. I would, if it were me, but I already have one. Sorry. There's also usually a few volumes of cheese and some non-alcoholic libation. So if you just go no alcohol, right across the hall. And then you can also ask more questions if you have a question we didn't have time for you. So thank you very much.